Welcome to the BluStar Application Server Advanced Configuration Tutorial, Module 3. Now let's configure Bandwidth Manager. The first step is to define the network locations. The second step is to define the links and apply the appropriate policies. In this example, the links will be defined as the endpoints of each network location to the hub. For training purposes, I will superimpose a map over the Bandwidth Manager screens. The map will provide a visual guide as I configure each network location and then each link. I'll click on Bandwidth Manager Networks. Here, I will add network locations and add the IP address or IP address range that the BAS will use to identify the 8000i terminals for that network location. So I'll begin by clicking on the Add button. I'll name the first network CA Corporate Network. In the Type drop-down list, I'll select Network. In the Matches field, I'll type the IP address, multiple IP addresses, or the IP address range. Hover your mouse over the question mark to see valid inputs. For a range, type the beginning IP address of the range, then type a dash, no spaces, and the end IP address of the range. If there are additional IP addresses or ranges on this network, type them in the following lines. Remember, this is just for the IP addresses on the Canada corporate network. I'll set up the US and Europe networks in just a minute. When I'm finished, click on the Save button. Then I'll click on the Back to Network Filter button. I'll repeat the process for the US remote office. I'll click on the Add button and input the information for the US remote office. I'll input the IP address range, click Save, and Back to Network Filter. Now I'll set up the Europe office. I'll click the Add button and input the information for the Europe VPN Michael's office. I'll click the Save button and Back to Network Filters. And finally, I'll add the hub. In this tutorial, the BAS will be the hub. I'll name and select the type as hub. Then I'll click Save and Back to Network Filters. There are my 3 locations and the hub. I'll click on the Bandwidth Manager breadcrumb. The next step is to define each link and apply a policy. So I'll click on Bandwidth Manager Links. Here, I will define the 2 endpoints that make up a link. In this example, I will define each network location as one endpoint, and the hub, in this case that's the BAS, as the second endpoint. When I'm finished, I'll have 3 links: the Canada Corporate Office to the hub, the US Remote Office to the hub, and the Europe VPN Michael's office to the hub. So now I'll begin and create the first link, Canada Corporate Office to the hub. I'll click on the Add button. I'll name the first link CA Corp Hub. Under the Network 1 drop-down list, I'll select CA Corporate Network. Under Network 2 drop-down list, I'll select Hub. Under the Policy drop-down list, I'll select High Bandwidth. In the Total Link Bandwidth box, I'll type the maximum available bandwidth. This number is in kilobits. So for this network, I'll type 100,000 kilobits, which is 100 megabits. I'll click on the Save button and back to Bandwidth Manager Links. I'll repeat the process for the next 2 links. The US Remote Office link, I'll select Medium Bandwidth and enter the maximum bandwidth of 10,000, which is 10 megabits. And the Europe VPN Michael's link, for this link, I'll select the custom policy I built earlier and enter the maximum bandwidth of 6,000, 6 megabits. So now when I make a call from one link to another, Bandwidth Manager will govern that call. The last thing I want to show you is called Bandwidth Manager Information. Click on Tools, then Bandwidth Manager Information. Here you can see a summary of each link used in Bandwidth Manager. It displays the usage in both kilobits and percentage, and the link settings. There is currently a call in progress between the U.S. Remote Office and the Canada Corporate Office. This page doesn't tell me how many calls are being used between locations, just the amount of bandwidth on each link. The page is displayed in the form of a snapshot, so I'll have to hit the refresh button to get an update. Now I can see additional bandwidth is being managed by Bandwidth Manager. So that was an example of how to set up Bandwidth Manager.